$842 billion. That is the official defense budget of the United States for a single fiscal year. It buys a physical fortress unmatched in human history. 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers patrolling the oceans. Fleets of F-35 stealth fighters owning the airspace. Thousands of armored military bases, fortified with concrete, steel, and heavily armed personnel. A machine built to project absolute kinetic power anywhere on the globe. But physical power has a blind spot, a massive, glaring vulnerability. Look closely at a digital poster recently published by the Diplomatic Security Service, the Rewards for Justice program. It does not show a terrorist mastermind with an assault rifle. It shows a hooded figure made of binary code. The text across the top is a desperate plea disguised as a bounty. Reward up to $10 million. $10 million in cold cash. Not for a capture, not for a targeted strike, but for information, for a name, for an online persona, for a location. The targets are Iranian malicious cyber actors, groups operating under monikers like Parshin Afzar, Rayan Borna, and Handala. The United States government is offering a life-changing fortune just to know who is sitting behind a keyboard. This is not a display of strength. It is a $10 million white flag, an admission that the most heavily defended nation on Earth cannot find its attackers. The attackers are invisible. They do not cross borders with tanks. They cross routers. They do not trigger radar networks. They bypass firewalls. The superpower is bleeding, and it does not even know the face of the one holding the knife. Let us break down the exact wording of this unprecedented bounty. For information on the identification or location of any person who participates in malicious cyber activities against U.S. critical infrastructure, in violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The phrasing is cold and legalistic, but the reality is terrifying. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is the primary shield against digital intrusion. It is failing. The groups mentioned, Parshin, Afzar, Rayan Borna, and Handala, are not rogue teenagers in a basement. They are structured, disciplined, and relentless. They act at the direction or under the control of a foreign government. This is state-sponsored warfare. A ghost army operating with the resources of a nation-state, but without the physical footprint. The $10 million is a mathematical calculation, a desperate equation. The damage these actors can inflict in a single hour far exceeds $10 million. The government knows this. They are trying to buy a single loose thread to unravel an entire digital network. It is a strategy born of pure asymmetry. When you cannot shoot the enemy, you bribe their shadow. To understand the panic driving this bounty, you must understand the architecture of the target. U.S. critical infrastructure. It is a term that sounds abstract until the lights go out. We are talking about the vascular system of a modern nation, the power grid spanning across continents, the water treatment facilities filtering millions of gallons a day, the transportation networks routing thousands of trains and aircraft, the financial sector processing trillions of dollars in milliseconds. All of it is connected. All of it relies on industrial control systems, programmable logic controllers, PLCs. These are the digital brains operating the physical valves, switches, and turbines. You can put 2 armed guards with AR-15 rifles outside the physical gate of a water treatment plant. You can build a 10-foot concrete wall topped with razor wire. It means absolutely nothing. A guard cannot shoot a packet of malicious data. A concrete wall cannot stop a privilege escalation protocol. The attackers are 10,000 miles away, sitting in a nondescript room in Tehran. They do not need to breach the physical perimeter. They only need to breach the digital one. They scan the internet for exposed ports. They exploit outdated firmware. They weaponize the very connectivity that makes the infrastructure efficient. Let us examine the anatomy of this blind spot, the arrogance of the system. For decades, security was defined by physical mass, bigger walls, thicker armor. The digital transition happened too fast. Vital systems were brought online for convenience before they were secured for survival. Legacy hardware, built 30 years ago without a concept of the internet, is now patched into global networks. The defenders are playing a reactionary game. They build a firewall. The attackers find a zero-day exploit, a vulnerability unknown to the software vendor. The defenders patch the exploit. The attackers use stolen credentials. It is a continuous loop of penetration and response. But the attackers only need to be right once. The defenders must be right every single second of every single day. The asymmetry is crushing. Handala knows this. Parsian Afzar Rayan Borna knows this. They operate in the digital gaps. They map the network topology of American energy companies. They identify the weak links. A third-party vendor with poor password hygiene. A remote employee connecting via an unsecured virtual private network. The entry point is always mundane. A phishing email disguised as an urgent invoice. A poisoned software update. Once inside, the methodology is silent. They do not break things immediately. They establish persistence. They create backdoors. They move laterally through the network, elevating their privileges step by step. From a low-level user account to a domain administrator, they embed themselves deep within the server architecture. They wait. They become ghosts in the machine. And the physical fortress above ground remains completely unaware that the foundations are already wired for detonation. The $10 million bounty is the sound of an alarm ringing long after the perimeter has been breached. It is the sound of a system realizing that all its guns and all its ships are useless against a single line of malicious code. Consider the economics of modern warfare. A single Tomahawk cruise missile costs approximately $2 million. It requires a guided missile destroyer for deployment. It requires a highly sophisticated satellite network for targeting coordinates. When it detonates, it destroys exactly one physical building, a structure reduced to concrete rubble. Now consider the economics of a state-sponsored cyber offensive, a malicious payload, a few hundred kilobytes of data. It costs absolutely nothing to duplicate. It is written by a small, dedicated team sitting in a secure office building in Tehran. It requires no aviation fuel. It requires no physical launch pad. Yet, it possesses the capability to paralyze the entire eastern seaboard of the United States. Look at the historical precedent of infrastructure attacks. A single compromised password on the dark web. A dormant virtual private network account left active by a former employee. That is all it takes to halt the flow of millions of barrels of refined oil, to trigger instantaneous panic buying at gas stations across multiple states, to force the federal government to declare regional states of emergency. This is the symphony of destruction orchestrated by groups like Handala and Parsian Afzar Rayan Borna. They do not need to smuggle physical explosives across the border. They simply weaponize the target system against itself. Let us deeply examine the tactical execution of these invisible warriors. The exact modus operandi of state-sponsored advanced persistent threats. They never attempt to brute force their way through the heavily guarded front door of a network. They exploit the weakest link in any billion-dollar security perimeter: the human psychology. The initial breach almost always begins with spear-phishing. A meticulously crafted email sent directly to a specific mid-level, engineer at a critical infrastructure facility. The email is highly contextual. It perfectly mimics the communication style of a trusted third-party vendor. It contains an urgent PDF attachment regarding a mandatory quarterly security audit. The engineer opens the file. The human element fails. The embedded malware executes silently in the background. Completely undetected by legacy antivirus software, scanning for known signatures. It immediately establishes an encrypted command and control beacon, a digital lifeline routing back to a proxy server located in a non-extraditable jurisdiction. From this single infected workstation, the infiltration rapidly metastasizes. The attackers deploy advanced penetration testing tools like Cobalt Strike, software originally designed for corporate security audits, now aggressively weaponized by state actors. They scrape the system memory to extract administrative credentials in plain text. They bypass multi-factor authentication protocols using sophisticated session hijacking techniques. They methodically move laterally from the corporate information technology network into the operational technology network, the OT network. This is the absolute danger zone. This is the exact point where digital commands are translated into kinetic physical actions, where a line of code electronically opens a massive physical valve, where a script shuts down a critical cooling pump, where a remote command alters the delicate chemical balance of a municipal water supply system. These attackers operate with chilling meticulousness. They map every single network node, every programmable logic controller, every human-machine interface. They steal and study the proprietary engineering diagrams of the target facility. They often understand the intricate industrial processes better than the local operators themselves. This is not a random smash and grab operation for quick financial gain. This is a sustained, highly calculated military occupation of sovereign digital territory. Parsian Afzar Rayan Borna operates with the absolute patience of a sniper. They are known to dwell inside a compromised network for 6 months, sometimes even years, silently monitoring internal email communications, exfiltrating terabytes of sensitive intellectual property, mapping disaster recovery protocols, just waiting for the optimal geopolitical moment to execute the destructive payload. The asymmetry of this conflict is absolute. The United States government spends hundreds of billions of dollars developing advanced kinetic weapons to deter physical invasions. But those weapons are entirely useless against a sophisticated supply chain attack. Hackers have previously compromised the software update mechanisms used by thousands of organizations. They turned a trusted, digitally signed security patch into a devastating Trojan horse. They bypassed the impenetrable firewall perimeter by simply hiding their malicious code inside the routine supply trucks entering the network. It is a brilliant, devastating maneuver. The scale of such compromises is so massive that the exact depth of the national security damage can never be fully quantified. The attackers also leverage the dark market of zero-day exploits, software vulnerabilities that are completely unknown to the original developers. A zero-day exploit gives the defenders exactly 0 days to prepare a patch. These digital weapons are bought and sold for millions of dollars in clandestine forums. Handala and associated groups have the state backing to acquire or develop these premium cyber weapons. They launch surgical strikes against zero-day vulnerabilities in enterprise firewalls and enterprise routers. They compromise the very edge devices designed to protect the network. They turn the security cameras and the perimeter sensors into tools for espionage. This is the terrifying reality facing the Diplomatic Security Service and the Department of State. A reality where physical borders are completely obsolete. where the actual front lines of the war are located inside server racks in Virginia, hyperscale data centers in Texas, and utility control rooms in Ohio. The enemy is everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The infrastructure system is simply too vast to defend perfectly. It is too deeply interconnected to isolate without causing catastrophic economic collapse. The defenders are perpetually trapped in a reactive posture, putting out massive digital fires while the arsonists remain completely anonymous. The $10 million bounty is a metric of this exact desperation. A massive price tag placed on a phantom. The intelligence agencies have the malicious IP addresses. They have the reverse-engineered malware signatures. They have terabytes of encrypted network logs. But they fundamentally lack the human context. They desperately need a name, a face, a physical location to target with physical assets, because until they can put a physical human body in a physical prison cell, the malicious code will keep compiling. The targeted attacks will keep coming. The invisible war will continue to escalate without any end in sight. Look closely at the bottom of the wanted poster. It contains a specific instruction. Text us on Signal or via our Tor-based tip line. Below that instruction is an onion web address, a dark web routing protocol. The United States government is not asking informants to walk into an embassy. They are not asking for a standard phone call. They are utilizing the exact same encrypted infrastructure that cybercriminals use to hide. The Onion Router network bounces internet traffic through thousands of volunteer relays worldwide. It strips the origin IP address at the entry node. It encrypts the data at every single intermediate node. It completely anonymizes the final destination. Signal utilizes strict end-to-end encryption protocols. The cryptographic keys are stored exclusively on the local endpoint devices. They are never transmitted to a central server. The Diplomatic Security Service chose these specific, highly encrypted channels for a precise tactical reason. They deeply understand the hostile operating environment of their targets. They know that a potential informant operating inside an Iranian state-sponsored hacking group is under constant extreme surveillance. Internal security monitors all unencrypted internet traffic. They log every keystroke. A standard digital footprint communicating with an American intelligence agency would equal an immediate physical death sentence. By deploying a dedicated Tor tip line, the United States is actively weaponizing the adversary's own digital camouflage against them. They are constructing a highly secure digital bridge directly into the heart of the enemy's offensive cyber operation. This is no longer just a defensive cybersecurity operation. This is an aggressive psychological warfare campaign. Analyze the core mechanism of the $10 million bounty. It is not designed to capture a fugitive who is already running from the law. It is designed to manufacture a fugitive from within a highly secure, state-run facility. It is a highly engineered, targeted psychological attack aimed directly at the internal cohesion of groups like Handala and Parsian Afzar Rayan Borna. These advanced persistent threat groups function strictly on absolute internal trust. They operate in highly compartmentalized cells. They share highly classified zero-day exploits. They meticulously coordinate multi-vector attacks on American critical infrastructure. The United States government is deliberately injecting a massive toxic dose of paranoia directly into that closed ecosystem. $10 million is a staggering, reality-altering figure. It fundamentally alters the basic calculation of risk and reward for every single operative. Imagine a secure, windowless room in Tehran. 5 elite programmers are actively compiling a highly sophisticated, malicious payload to target a United States municipal water treatment facility. Before this specific poster was published, They were a unified, highly efficient weapon. Now, every single person sitting in that room is a catastrophic potential liability to the others. The programmer writing the rootkit persistence mechanism looks at the network architect. The architect looks at the payload deployment specialist. The United States government is aggressively planting a specific, highly destructive question in their minds. Will the person sitting exactly 3 feet across from me trade my physical freedom for a $10 million offshore wire transfer? This extreme, manufactured paranoia severely degrades their operational efficiency. It forces the hacking group to expend massive computational and human resources hunting for potential internal spies instead of writing destructive malicious code. It dramatically slows down the entire attack lifecycle, but the psychological attack goes even deeper into the human element. Look at the absolute last sentence printed on the poster. You could be eligible for a reward and relocation. Relocation is the ultimate operational payload of this entire campaign. The $10 million is entirely useless if the informant is immediately executed for state treason. The United States is offering a complete systemic extraction package, a brand new physical identity, a highly classified physical exfiltration from a hostile nation-state, a safe, secure harbor inside the very physical borders the informant was previously paid by their government to attack. The United States government is actively searching for the ultimate insider threat. They are looking for the single, disillusioned operative, the one highly skilled engineer who feels underappreciated or underpaid by his government handlers. The Diplomatic Security Service only needs exactly one person to break protocol, one person to silently install a hardware keylogger on a commanding officer's machine, one person to secretly photograph the physical architecture of the server room, one person to leak the unencrypted command and control communication logs through the Tor network. If just one internal domino falls, the entire state-sponsored cyber cell collapses entirely. The United States intelligence apparatus will reverse engineer the entire malicious operation from the inside out. They will positively identify the commanding military officers. They will trace and map the clandestine funding streams. They will proactively patch the targeted infrastructure vulnerabilities before the destructive payload is ever successfully deployed. It is an extremely cost-effective military strategy. $10 million is a microscopic, almost invisible fraction of the $842 billion defense budget. It is significantly cheaper than replacing a single compromised physical power grid substation. It is drastically cheaper than mobilizing the entire naval carrier strike group to the Persian Gulf. This brings us to the ultimate chilling paradox of modern global conflict. The United States military possesses the absolute most advanced kinetic hardware ever engineered by humanity. They can actively track a ballistic missile launch from low Earth orbit. They can successfully intercept a hypersonic glide vehicle traveling at Mach 5. They can deploy autonomous aerial drones to eliminate a specific physical target with surgical millimeter precision. They have spent trillions of taxpayer dollars building an impenetrable, highly militarized physical fortress around the entire nation. They employ the most highly sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms to continuously monitor global network traffic. They utilize elite advanced persistent threat hunting teams to aggressively secure the digital perimeter. They encrypt all classified military communications with military-grade AES 256-bit keys. The physical hardware is flawless. The mathematics of the encryption algorithms are theoretically unbreakable. The physical security protocols surrounding the critical infrastructure are absolute. but the entire billion-dollar system has been entirely bypassed. The massive physical firewall is fundamentally irrelevant. The highly guarded nuclear arsenal provides absolutely zero deterrence against this specific threat. Because the ultimate, fatal vulnerability is not a misconfigured database server. It is not an unpatched legacy operating system. It is not a weak network firewall rule. The ultimate unpatchable vulnerability is a human being. The United States government has finally realized that the absolute only way to successfully defeat a digital ghost is to simply buy the physical person sitting at the keyboard. The most powerful nation on Earth is standing in the digital shadows, holding a briefcase of cash, and desperately begging the enemy for a name. The perfect, impenetrable security system simply does not exist. Because as long as human beings are the ones writing the code, human beings will always be the most critical, devastating loophole in the machine. Welcome to the Invisible War. You have been listening to Shadow Dossier.